Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, today we're really cutting through the usual chatter, the entertainment and news cycle stuff. Our focus is pretty specific, actually. We're doing a deep analysis of the material we have around Kelly Clarkson's return for season 7 of her show. And what we're seeing here, it's more than just a schedule thing. It feels like documentation of a really profound personal moment.
This comeback, it just feels inherently different, doesn't it?
Mhm.
The reports we've looked at, they all highlight this kind of gravity around the premiere. It's a tone that's really quite sharp, different from your typical daytime TV launch fanfare.
Exactly. And that's why this deep dive feels, necessary. We've got source material detailing her time away after a personal tragedy, and also the very, very deliberate way she chose to come back into the public eye.
So if we look at all the information, the sort of mission here is clear, right? What does this specific path she chose, this return that seems defined by, let's say, intention rather than the usual showbiz splash, what does that tell us about how public figures, try to navigate really genuine private grief when they live in this hyper-public world? Let's try and map this out and maybe start with the basic context, the loss, the absence.
Okay, yeah, let's pin down the timeline, because that intentionality you mentioned, it seems like it started way before the actual season 7 premiere. So Brandon Blackstock, Kelly's ex-husband, he passed away recently, August 7th, 2025.
Mm-hmm. And we know from the reports that this was after a really long battle with melanoma. And while, yes, they divorced back in 2022, the sources really stress how she needed to respond, as a co-parent.
As a person.
Right. And that need seems to have led to what the reports are calling this intentional pause.
Right.
She didn't just, delay the season start. She properly stepped back from the spotlight in those final months before he passed. And that decision, choosing family first, that really feels like the start of this whole narrative we're seeing. The notes we reviewed emphasized she did it specifically to be, quote, fully present with their children.
Oh.
That's the intentionality right there.
Yeah.
It's not just stopping work. It's like she was deliberately managing her public story, choosing that mother role over the talk show host role when it truly mattered. And that sets the stage for the very specific kind of nuanced return we're trying to analyze now.
Yeah, that distinction feels key. She wasn't running away from work. She was choosing the most important work she had right then. So, okay, she steps away for her kids. How did the material show her bringing that private strength back to a, very public stage? Let's get into that graceful step forward idea.
So she comes back with a season 7 premiere, September 29th, 2025. And the vibe, according to everything we read, was really striking. The analysis makes it super clear. This wasn't some big dramatic comeback tour. The reports talk about this palpable focus on resilience. They carefully frame it as a graceful step forward, not a, flashy rebound.
Yeah. Okay, but how do you actually do graceful resilience on a big daytime talk show? I mean, you still need the ratings, the celebrity buzz, right?
Well, that seems to be the clever part, the structure of the episode itself, based on the breakdown we studied. You had your essential celebrity element, right? A-listers, Colin Farrell, Margot Robbie, they brought the necessary Hollywood sparkle.
Yeah.
But the emotional core, the thing that really grounded the whole hour, was something totally different.
Ah, you're talking about that tribute segment.
Exactly. And it wasn't, a celebrity cause or anything overtly political. It was dedicated to local heroes.
Yeah.
Flood rescuers in Texas. Specifically, these local school bus drivers who apparently saved hundreds of kids in a recent disaster.
Wow. Okay, that is a fascinating choice. Why school bus drivers? Why that kind of grassroots practical bravery as the emotional center right next to Hollywood stars?
Well, it seems to connect right back to that intentionality thing and what the analysis called tribute is reflection. Think about it. Someone grieving deeply often can't, or maybe doesn't want to, spell out their own internal fight, the sheer effort it takes just to function. So by celebrating this really concrete, external, life-saving heroism of the bus drivers, she kind of creates this safe mirror, a mirror for her own, maybe more abstract, internal struggle for recovery. It's like she's signaling, without having to say the words, this is the kind of courage I value, and this is the resilience I'm trying to find myself.
So you're saying celebrating their life-saving actions, was almost like giving the audience a window into her own internal fight, kind of validating her own journey through their strength.
Precisely. It lets her acknowledge the seriousness, the life and death reality that the audience knows she's dealing with, but without needing a big, tearful confession on camera. It suggests that, healing doesn't have to be this dark, hidden thing. Her approach kind of shows that real grief can actually coexist with light, with laughter, and importantly, with recognizing the good that's still out there.
Okay. This definitely brings us to decoding those emotional layers. And for me, this is where the analysis gets really, really interesting. The sources keep pointing to the silent grief. Kelly didn't name her loss directly on the show, but the reporting suggests that, quote, everyone felt the weight. That silence, especially on a talk show that's all about talking, it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It's that space, isn't it? The gap between the expected, cheerful talk show chat and the underlying reality everyone knows is there. She didn't give a standard statement, but you could feel that emotional tension. And if that tribute, like we said, set the stage for her internal state, then the music. Well, the music seems to have been the emotional release.
Right. Let's dive into that Kellyoke performance. She closed the premiere singing Blinding Lights by The Weeknd.
Yeah, and this is a huge point in the material we looked at. Choosing that song, a pulsing synth pop track about, well, emotional dependency, searching for connection. That's not a sad ballad, right? Is a really powerful choice. The analysis we read calls it a signal, a moment where the music was allowed to, quote, carry her emotion in a way that maybe words just couldn't at that point.
But why Blinding Lights specifically? If you think about the lyrics, they're about being totally overwhelmed, almost consumed, but still pushing forward. That line, I said, ooh, I'm blinded by the lights. No, I can never stop.
That's got to be the connection, right? In the context of this profound loss, that song just transforms. It stops being just a club track. It becomes almost an anthem of, like, compulsion. Grieving in public, especially as a parent with responsibilities, it forces you to keep moving, even when you feel emotionally just blinded or totally overwhelmed by everything. The sheer relentless energy of that song, it works like a sonic metaphor for that kind of forced resilience. Yeah. She can never stop because she's a mom and she has this very public job.
Huh. That completely shifts how you hear that performance. It's not a celebration of being back necessarily. It becomes this very public musical kind of confession about how hard it is to just keep going. The music's doing the emotional work.
Sure.
The talking part is deliberately avoiding.
Absolutely. Music became the perfect vehicle, really, to communicate where she was. Since she wasn't using words to detail the pain, all that emotional weight just shifted onto the arrangement, her delivery. It gives the audience that sense of catharsis they might need, but it respects her personal boundary.
So this does raise bigger questions, doesn't it? For the industry, I mean, about public vulnerability. I often feel like grieving authentically on TV must be almost impossible. Doesn't turning your pain into, well, content risk making it feel cheap or cynical? What do the sources say about how this kind of return might be seen long term?
That is the central tension, isn't it? Can public figures really grieve authentically on camera when their whole job relies on projecting a certain image? But Kelly's approach here, the subtle stuff, the mirrored tribute, the song choice, that might be the argument against it just being cynical commodification. It avoids that typical, tell-all interview structure that can often feel really exploitative.
Okay, so if she keeps this up, this sort of subtle but clear acknowledgement, does it maybe possibly open the door for talk shows in general to allow for a bit more vulnerability? It definitely pushes against that old TV idea that everything has to look perfect and polished when the cameras are on.
It certainly challenges the old model, yeah. And we are seeing audiences respond pretty positively to this feeling of, like, shared subtle reality. Looking forward, the reports speculate about maybe two main paths she could take with this platform she's created.
Okay, what are those possibilities?
Well, there's the obvious one. Maybe she uses future episodes to talk about the loss more directly. Perhaps, down the line, when things aren't so raw. But the other path, which seems more artistically interesting maybe, and fits with the premiere, is that she keeps letting the music do the talking, using that Kellyoke segment as this ongoing, like, emotional check-in for where she's at.
And we might also see her lean into certain causes, right? Given the whole context, the material suggests potential focuses like maybe mental health or grief awareness or even cancer-related causes, kind of taking that really intense personal pain and trying to shape it into a lasting public purpose.
And that feels like the ultimate takeaway, really, distilling everything we've looked at. Her return wasn't just a successful premiere ratings-wise. It's become this really human case study about transforming awful pain into, well, intentional purpose. All within the pretty tricky constraints of a daytime talk show. It kind of redefines what resilience looks like on that kind of stage.
Yeah, this deep dive really shows that Kelly Clarkson's return, fundamentally, it's a human story, loss, resilience, but done with such clear intention. Choreographed carefully through the choices she made about the show's content, its emotional underpinning. We've seen how those subtle messages, the bus drivers, the unspoken grief, that specific song choice, they end up being maybe much louder, more impactful than any direct statement could have been.
And that leaves us, in you listening, with maybe a final thought to just mull over. We talked a lot about how music became the vehicle for her healing journey, letting her communicate without explicit words. So if you had to pick one song right now to publicly express your own current healing journey or your resilience, the song that really carries your emotion at this moment, what would it be? What is your own personal Kellyoke choice say about where you are in your path? Something for you to think about?